case study review. I've got three of my amazing friends, and we'll present the case study to you, and you'll see the format of how it evolves. It's a very simple review of a typical situation that you might face in your organization. So I hope you benefit from our conversation and jokes. Maybe you don't get it, but that's great. So Dave, you want to get us started with a brief introduction to yourself, then we'll have Zahir introduce, and then Jeff.
Sure.
And then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay. My name is Dave Pryor. I am a certified Scrum trainer. I work for Leading Agile, and I come from a traditional project management background. I didn't want anything to do with Agile, hated it, and was dragged kicking and screaming into it the entire way. And eventually changed my mind about it. And now I feel really, really fortunate to have a job which I describe as every day I get to make the transition to Agile suck less for other people than it did for me.
Beautiful. You have a podcast, Dave, right?
I have two podcasts. I do one for Leading Agile Sound Notes, and I have another one, Drunken PM Radio is the way to find it if you look it up on iTunes.
Awesome. Don't miss out. I really enjoy talking to Dave, and I've been a guest a couple of times. So
yes,
yeah.
Always a good time.
I got into Agile like so many other people out of frustration. The old question of what the heck are we doing, and realizing at some point that you're just angry and you're saying to yourself, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way. One of the things I've always told people is that in many ways, it's even more important that we bring Agile to hardware, because in software and in marketing and finance, in art, in those areas, it's natural in many ways to be more agile. But in hardware, there's a tendency to be afraid, and the values and principles that Agile brings and the techniques it brings freeze creativity within hardware and technology development. So I'm very passionate about it. I've helped implement Agile either directly under the flag of Agile or surreptitiously and as almost a bit of an insurrection at places like the Department of Energy, NASA, and the DoD.
So Jeff, tell us more about yourself.
Jeff Davis. I'm currently a principal consultant at AMZ Consulting, and I have a history of working with the Agile principles and sort of going back to the manifesto to somewhere in the range of like 2005 or 2006. And I was working at Microsoft at the time and trying to figure out ways to more quickly meet the demands of these new customers who were doing these new things called cloud services. Right. And so I kind of fell in love with it at the time, because a bit like Dave, where, you know, was PMP certified and had some background in the very strict nature of things. It didn't feel very like it was treating the human system with respect. And that's something that I'm always looking for more of as I'm implementing Agile or thinking about how we go about this stuff.
Let me share the case study. Yeah, I'm going to share the screen and I'll read out the case study, and then we're going to play this game called Hashtag It. The title of the case study is Waterfall and Agile Hybrid. And this case study was submitted by my friend. They are in a very big corporation. What is happening there is that the management is implementing waterfall projects, which is not that uncommon, right? You find projects being implemented in traditional organizations. These management projects, they are impacting the Agile team members because the way they are structured is they have Agile teams, and then there are projects that are different from the work that the Agile teams are doing. So the Agile team members are expected to work on management projects in addition to their sprint commitments. This often leads to confusion for the team members, and it forces them to miss committed sprint timelines. I know this case study is not fully defined, you know, and that's part of the motivation here is to kind of see how you look at this particular problem. How do you look at this situation? Because I know you all have years of experience, right, encountering similar situations before. So as part of the case study submission process, right, my friend had to provide me with the case study, and then they had to hashtag it. I gave them all of these options. Now, of course, there could be an other option as well. So I'm more than happy to like include the other option here. I'm curious who'd like to go first and say, what are your top 3 hashtags for this case study?
So I went with hashtag team, hashtag leadership, and hashtag product. And the fast version of that, hashtag team, was for me about team member, you know, has some responsibility where changes should have been supported by their team and sort of incorporated into sprint planning. And I wonder, though they were missing things along the way, like were those adjustments made? Maybe to Dave's point, I was sort of questioning, did like the Scrum Master or coach sort of think about what that means? And if the team feels overly impacted by that, they should have been able to sort of stop the line, if you will, and sort of raise the issue from that impact.
Right. So what could the team have done? Right. That's a good question to ask. Thank you, Jeff.
I can go second. So I had capacity,
Yeah.
leadership, and management. And the reason I picked capacity was because if this is a waterfall project, I'm assuming they can predict how much of their time is going to get sucked away by the waterfall projects in each sprint. And whenever I've had that situation, if we can't change that, if it's like an inflexible thing, then my suggestion to the team is always, if you know this is going to be taking time away, you block out that much time, including context switching in every sprint. And I had leadership because I think clearly there's a breakdown there in terms of understanding what it's going to take to allow Agile to exist successfully in their organization. And management because I wasn't clear from the explanation of whether there were projects that were just running with waterfall or these were projects about managing the company, like if it was an organizational structural thing that was being run in waterfall. So that was my main reason for picking that one.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jeff. Sorry, Zahir, my bad.
So I put hashtag leadership, and it seems like we have a consensus on that one amongst the 3 of us. And that's probably, for me, it's kind of, I would say 3 parts leadership, the hashtag leadership, and then 1 part each hashtag culture and hashtag strategy. So that's where I differ a little bit.
Right.
The reason to me this smacks of leadership failure, because there's a quote from the Earthsea novels with Ursula Le Guin, and the main character finds this person who's supposed to be this long lost king, and he's sitting there thinking about it, and he said, if I could tell him to do anything, it would be to do nothing. First thing you do as a leader is you do nothing. You understand the situation, your people, your organization, and then you think about doing something. And to me, what this smacks of is leadership that doesn't understand. Now, in terms of culture, the reason I went to culture is because processes and all that are kind of at one level, but they're at a lower level of importance than mindset and culture when it comes to agility. And so this tells me that there's a culture problem in the organization, and strategy, because the phrasing is interesting. Management projects versus product, right? It's somewhat implied that the Agile team members are working on what makes the company money, and these other projects are who knows what. And yet they're impacting what's generating revenue for the company. So there's a clear strategy problem at the C level, because they don't understand what projects they need to be focused on. So to me, that was a big deal, and that's kind of where I got my leadership, culture, and strategy.
Thank you. This is a very, very helpful discussion. let me unhide my slide.
Can I say something really quick? So when you asked us to do that hashtag thing, I thought it was super weird and I didn't get it.
Right.
But now that I've heard the other two explanations of it, I'm fascinated by it that we all hit on different things. It was very cool.
Thank you. Hashtag it. All right, let's see who won how many story points, yeah? So I've already marked out what the hashtags were given by my friend, and I hope I can kind of do justice as I present it, no? So I share it, and you're all able to see, right, what they've done. So surprisingly, you know, my friend did not pick leadership as a hashtag, right? On the other hand, they did pick capacity. So 1 point for you, Dave. And they also picked culture. So here, there you go. And management. This does not mean that you are right or wrong, but as the game is played, I think Jeff Davis, right? 0 out of 3. So we'll give you infinity story points because I really loved how you described the position that you had for team, leadership, and the product.
You get more points if you got none right?
No, because the points don't matter, and I get.
So it's like high school, Dave. You got to shoot the moon. If you shoot the moon, you get 100%, right?
Man, you get a free game. You get to play again. Yeah.
Instant win.
Yeah,
that's right.
Now, Dave, like you hit 2 out of 3 because you captured capacity and management out of this. So quite predictable, and I think you understand the organization where they are at. So I'm definitely going to give you 8 story points. And Zahir, for the excellent quote, if I could tell him to do anything, do nothing. Even though you only hit 1 of the 3 hashtags from culture, I'll give you 13 story points. And the winner right now is Jeff Davis. What would you do? What would you do if you were in this situation? Like, management is implementing waterfall projects and it leads to team confusion. We're going to see what are 3 recommendations you would have for yourself.
Well, now that I got 0 correct.
And 1.
Yeah, I feel like I have to redeem myself a little bit here. No, I'm kidding. But it's, you know, what's funny is that maybe I was actually calling out things that were my pain in the past, and this is more of a counseling session, Davel. So thank you again. I'll slide you the 100 later. What would I do in these instances? And just because I've run into this a lot in software development, particularly in companies where software development isn't what they do, but what they need to sell things online or whatever that might be.
Right.
You know, making clear the prioritized investment portfolio by the value of business to the business and the outcomes to the customer, so that you have sort of an absolute stack ranking. And I think actually that aligns up with Zahir's point about strategy, where they're not clear on why those things are impacting or important, and they're not being forcing to constrain their decisions. They're trying to introduce more into the portfolio because they want it for some reason, but without clarity.
Yeah.
You have to reassess the committed projects and align resources, and then shift or stop work in order to make that pivot. And I think that aligns actually a bit with the capacity call out that Dave made.
Right.
And, you know, then I added things like make leadership accountable to employee survey results focused on the areas of confusion and the negative impact of the flow to the team. Because you can enforce this through directive sponsorship or getting those leaders to get into Gemba practices or other ways that you might incent them and sort of involve them, so that as they're making impact, they sort of feel it and also kind of go through that observation period also that Zahir was sort of recommending.
If I may jump in. Oh, no, sorry, David.
No, go ahead, Zahir. Thank you. Yeah, I really love the notion of surveys and making the leadership accountable for how employees feel. That was a great nugget.
one thing that strikes me is, if I may take a guess, your friend who brought you this case study is either kind of in the developer agile team ranks, or maybe a mid-level manager.
Right.
Yeah, I figured as much, because that's the perspective of capacity and management.
Tell me more. Yeah.
Right. So, he's thinking about, oh, look, I'm looking around at myself, my teammates were overstretched.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
And the unfortunate reality is that too many organizations focus on management and not enough on leadership. Right. And that's something that Agile attempts to break down. Right. Agile is part of our attempt to remove management. Nobody wants to be managed. I don't want to be managed, but I'm happy to be led, especially by somebody who's intelligent, charismatic, and helps create an environment where I can accomplish. Right. Management one of my professors said, of leadership, said to me once, is management is the crutch for bad leaders. Huh. Right. And there's this concept. If you look at where management MBAs, that concept came from, it came from, I forget his name, but a guy whose claim to fame was that he used a stopwatch to watch people on an assembly line and figured out how to make assembly lines run faster. You might remember the name of that. Yeah, Taylor, right? That's the father of the MBA. That's the father of modern management.
Right.
That's not what humans do anymore, especially at the highest value of product.
Right.
So why are we still managing people who create, who innovate? You don't manage those people, you lead them. And then they create and innovate in a space in which they're allowed to flourish. And to me, that's why when I saw, I'm like, this person must be in the team or stuck in middle management, where it doesn't have an ability to affect kind of this. So what to me this smacks of is an organization that hasn't done this transformation, but it has to be at a D level, a directorate, vice president, C, for it to actually affect. And if that had happened, then you wouldn't see this. That's my opinion. But that level, the D level and up, doesn't get it yet. The corporation has not changed mindset. They've implemented tools and processes, but it's that onion chart that all of us have a slide on in all of our Agile presentations, right? About the relevance and effectiveness, right? And mindset is the biggest one. Right. And processes and tools are down there in the middle, right? And so they failed at that big part of the onion and are focused on a little bit of the onion. And a lot of that is because they haven't transitioned in the directorate level, and they don't know how to lead agility.
Well, the gauntlet has been thrown.
I want to buy an argument. So I love talking smack about Taylor. I do it all the time. I've always considered him to be like the root of all evil. And I'm reading the book Team of Teams by General Stanley McChrystal. And one of the things that in the beginning of the book that like completely, I feel like I get smacked in the face, was his explanation of Taylor, who I only know as the guy at Ford and who figured out all this stuff about, measuring and optimizing teams. During World War I and World War II in the United States, when they had to transition factories and get new workers who had only worked on farms to work in factories and build stuff, that was all based on Taylor's work. And his part of his explanation was the country never would have been able to make that change without his work. And so I was like, damn, I got to stop talking shit about Frederick Taylor. But it's a different problem. I think that's the core of it. Like, so here, what you were just saying about it is absolutely true. Those practices that come out of waterfall are solving a different problem than the problem we're faced with today. And I think that maybe that's the struggle. I mean, that they don't know how to let go of that old way, or their organization is not structured in a way to support Agile yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a PMP. I have a foot in both worlds personally, because I believe in waterfall management, but for certain things.
Okay.
But I saw, but it was with Bechtel Nevada that I saw it fail miserably, because we were a science organization. The Nevada Test Site does research. We do physics, and they couldn't do R&D applying those models. It broke. And those of us like me, managers, project managers, I was a project manager, were left figuring out, what the hell do I do
Yeah.
Right.
How do I get this? How do I rescue it? And I went out into the desert, spent my 40 days, you know, wandering around the Nevada test site,
Sat under a tree.
yeah, exactly. Sand under, no, not a tree, a Joshua tree, right? You know, or a yucca, whatever. And then there, glowing, was the Agile Manifesto.
Oh, Jesus.
You know,
Wow. That's scary.
So I think here's what I'm hearing so far, right? I'm hearing that the approach that is taken for today's problems is no longer the fitness of a waterfall style approach, project approach is not suitable for the kind of problems and challenges that are being faced today. And Dave, you kind of tried to balance it by saying, you know, back in the early 1900s, the country would not have made it out unless there was like a very, here's how we do.
It worked to if you had to take somebody who had no experience with a factory, you could put them in a place and say, do this way.
Right.
And they're like a cog in a machine, and they treated them that way. Unfortunately, in knowledge work, we're not cogs in a machine anymore.
Right.
But we still have a bunch of people who got their executive offices by treating people that way, and they think that's the way to do things. And so I just think it's a poor fit between a solution and a problem.
Well, and executives, like anybody, try to simplify their work at times. And I think that one thing that I've tried to do in my practice and working with leadership in the last couple of years is resist less waterfall, but define its purpose with clarity. Because they want a portfolio of investments, and sometimes getting this new data center off the ground is a thing that you should construct and do one way, and then iterate from there and sort of introduce agile practice afterwards. But always get that difference between the final one-time investment versus this thing that I'm going to iterate on, my practices, the product itself, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
well, and Jeff, you bring up a really subtle but important point. Is that you said once that initial investment is done, project management is different than agility. Right? Because when you think about modern products versus projects, the old way, you built a product by a project. But now it's a little different. Products you're always building your product.
I have a question about these folks though. If they feel obligated to keep the waterfall stuff and the agile stuff, have they looked at things like bimodal, or are they just cobbling this thing together because it's the only thing they can think of to do?
Right. I think the way I would describe it, Dave, is this is happening at two different layers. And I want to amplify what Zahir said. Like, this is probably a person who is feeling this because they're at a middle management level, as opposed to being at the director or the C level.
So they can't affect any change.
Right. It's almost like there's that layer, impermeable layer, where you can't like go past a particular hierarchy in the organization.
Right.
And
Zahir made a really great point too, where in exposing that layer, like, to overly simplify, there's sort of strategy, tactics, and operations, and you could condense anybody's business into those three stacks in some way. And from the position that you're working in the overall environment, you'll see the problem differently and describe it differently. And that was brilliant.
So let's look at what my friend has tried so far, right? And after we look at that, I hope like we can give at least one takeaway or summarize our takeaways for my friend, recognizing that they are in the middle management, so they don't have that visibility to influence the prioritized portfolios, something that you mentioned, Jeff, right? If they were at the C level, they would have like a very clear direction. This is what you do.
I'm really nervous about that being okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hearing like Christopher Avery in the back of my head. Like, if that's the card, okay, but great, fix it anyway.
Right. Yeah. No, let's see what they've done,
okay.
and then we'll see where we go. Yeah.
Yep.
I just want to say I agree with you, Dave.
Thank you.
All right. So here's what they've done so far, right? They've informed the management on the impact of their decisions. So whenever a waterfall project, which is essentially a transformational project from a business standpoint, not from let's become more agile standpoint. Whenever their work comes in the middle of the sprint, they have tried to inform the management on how it impacts the team. They've apologized for missing commitments at the sprint level. They've requested the business to plan their work. And to some degree, they've actually tried to help them out, but it's kind of hard to build those bridges every time when there is a different person from the business asking for a totally different thing at a different time, right? They've also tried to explain to team members that when these situations occur, stories take a back seat to the project work because the project work is more important. This goes back to your comment, Jeff, about the team response being the hashtag, how the team can choose to control and influence their environment. So knowing that this is what they've tried so far, what suggestions you have or where could they look? And I'm really curious about Dave and Zahir's.
I have 4 suggestions.
All right.
And some of them I've actually done. I had a gig where there was a team that was building new stuff in Agile, but they were also expected to maintain another system that broke down like every single day.
Right.
So I had the people on the team, and they were stuck with it. There was no way out of it. I had the team members track how much time they were losing on average to fixing the other system. And then in sprint planning, they would just carve out that capacity. And I built a tool around it that they would use. And I can give you a link to it for this like sprint planning capacity calculator. So,
right.
If I have 40 hours, but I know I'm only gonna have 20, I just plan accordingly. If you know the problem exists, then it's stupid to not react to it. I'm concerned about the person apologizing for missing commitments if they're missing commitments because someone is jamming work into their system. To me, that makes my soul ache a little bit. Management, the impact of that work, and if you can translate that into dollars or lost productivity, I think that would probably be more valuable to them. I'd also start exploring why the company's trying to switch to Agile in the first place, because if they're not going to let it exist, what's the point? And my 4th option would be to quit. Find a place that would let me do what I wanted to do. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
All right. So if I were to summarize, look at how much interrupting work is coming in, and you want to be concerned about people jamming work into your system and what you can do. So explore why that is happening.
Or why they say they want Agile in the first place if they're not going to let it exist.
Right. And the final comment was change the organization or change the organization.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I got to a point at a big consulting company where I couldn't do what I needed to do. And my only choice, I just realized if I'm going to do this, I have to go somewhere that'll let me do it.
Right. Right. Thank you.
But I wouldn't advocate anyone quitting during a pandemic.
Noted.
I want to double down on Dave's comment about the apologetic nature of what was in that list of bullets. Like, I guess one thing I would do is if this is a system that you can't change and there's some reality that you have to deal with, even while you're on this sort of change curve, maybe to something different, you should be able to remove sort of the apologetic and sheepish nature from it. Like,
right.
In some cases, that's something as simple as like a blameless post-mortem kind of like review of projects and things where you instill that in the culture of the blamelessness and sort of looking at tools and processes as the problem.
Right.
But really, again, back to like, how does leadership anticipate the impact to the people, their morale and their throughput as you're making these changes that you want to see in the system?
Yeah, I do kind of feel like apologizing, although it kind of, robs our soul away, you don't feel like that's the right thing to do. But it's also sometimes a way to cope with the situation, because if you're dealing with hierarchy that doesn't understand, saying I'm sorry probably just defers the conflict to later, as opposed to having to deal with that conflict on a day-to-day basis,
But it also teaches them that it's okay to keep doing this.
True, true.
I mean, if I punch you in the face and you apologize, I'm going to keep punching you in the face because it's fun, and I know you think it's your fault.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, your knuckles are bruised again.
Exactly.
Yes.
Look what you did to my knuckles.
You know, I agree with basically everything you guys have said. I would triple down on the apologize side, and I understand what you're saying, Davil.
Right.
Although, but I do think we are, especially in the in the areas where we're dealing with highly educated workforces.
Right.
I think we have to be in a post kind of apologize to appease management world. If your organization is in a place where you have to apologize to your manager, even if you actually did screw up, you probably have a problem with the corporate culture. We just should be past that. You know, it's 2020. We need to be more grown up. Now, I'm not saying everybody is, and you know, around the world there are degrees of that, but we need to be more grown up. However, maybe it's because I'm a physicist. I always go back to the numbers, and this reminds me of something that happened years ago. I was at NASA. We were setting up a lot of our stuff, and we were missing some deadline. There were delays, and we were complaining about some of the compliance and other requirements, and the compliance organization's answer was, oh, you're just complaining because you complain, you don't want to deal with it. Right. So what I did was I tabulated all of my team's hours, and I went and took it to the program director and said, look, we're spending 85% of our time dealing with compliance items. We're not saying we don't want to be compliant or safe, but can we bring these people to the table and have a discussion about how to, you know, move forward more efficiently? When he realized that he was getting 15% engineering work out of, you know, 50 people, he was not amused. And that brought people to the table. And I think that's, you know, that's one recommendation I would have, is to quantify it. Then the last thing I would say is that the Scrum Manager needs to grow a couple. Sorry, Scrum Master, right? Because the Scrum Master needs to grow a couple. Because at the end of the day, if you're a Scrum Master, you have to be willing to put your job on the line and say no. That is your role. Don't take it if you're not willing to do that. It is the hardest role, in my opinion, of all of the Scrum roles, because it's the person who has to call BS on everybody else. Right. It takes the most courage. It takes the most guts. And so, right, what's happening here is you're breaking down your Scrum if your Scrum Master is allowing that team to get this input. And that tells me that their Scrum Masters either don't feel empowered enough to speak truth to management and truth to power, right? Or they're a bunch of wimps. Either way, there's a major problem.
Knowing my friend, I'll stand up. I'll kind of stand in for them, right? I mean,
yeah. Oh, is your friend the Scrum Master?
No, but they're in the middle management, and they do have they have significant courage. Like that's definitely there. It's sometimes, you know, how do you choose the battles to fight? Because
yeah, I respect that.
Right. At some point, you have to say, okay, this battle is not worth fighting or worth getting fired over. And I totally concur with you. Some of the most fun projects or fun products that I've built are built with people who are able to express their voice in a manner that they get heard, right? And sometimes, like systematically, the organizations may not be, you know, geared towards listening to minorities, you know. So
yeah.
So it's a complex world.
Yeah.
Here's a really quick.
Yes, one last point, and then we summarize this for our friend.
Okay, I think when you talked about bringing the numbers to the manager to show him that it was 85% of the time that was being sucked up, that also I think is a really big deal. My experience has been that they don't know, like they have no idea how much time is being wasted, right? And so we're like, screw those guys, but they don't realize how badly they're hurting us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And if you can tie those numbers to the business outcomes,
yeah,
that's a force multiplier, right? Because at some point, right, if they're missing commitments in the sprint, then the question becomes, what work is more important.
Right.
And that may be what your friend meant by we've asked business to plan our work, but that's dangerous. You don't want business to plan your work. You want business to give you outcomes. These are the outcomes we want you to create for us, right? So if your friend can tie those numbers to outcomes that they know, and typically these outcomes are pretty well known through an organization, you know, and then say, look, you're making it unable for us to deliver outcome A, which you're saying is more important because you're pushing us on outcome B and C, then that can really change the conversation.
Totally. Awesome. Jeff, any final comments?
I really appreciate listening to just these two guys. I almost got sort of like I was watching my own podcast for a second there. But, you know, one thing both of them touched on that I would say was really important too to keep bringing back around is setting up the environment for success. And Dave hit it on like either these are your people or they're not, and Zahir hit it on like the leadership and strategy side of and cultural side of things too. So keep looking out for like how do you keep showing quantitatively or through stories what the system really looks like and show the mirror to leadership, you know.
Right. This is excellent. And
I want to see if Jeff can pick up Mjolnir. Pure enough of heart to wield Mjolnir.
I'm feeling less worthy this
If
morning.
he does that, it'll come to him. Thank you so much. This has been excellent. I really enjoyed this, and I hope you all enjoyed it too. So if you want to find out more about case studies, submit case studies so we can discuss it on this forum. Thank you, Dave, for your time and also sharing the spreadsheet. I'll make sure people get a way to access that spreadsheet calculator. And yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this again.